The green discharge from my breakfast ration tasted sweeter than usual this morning, almost floral, like the gardens in propaganda vids. I am Hadrius Venn, Manufactorum laborer of Hab-Block 7 Epsilon, Hive Tertius, 43 years of loyal service. Today marks 3 months since the Great Relief came. Life before the relief was exhausting, in ways I can barely remember now. 16-hour shifts at the pressing machines, sometimes 18 when the quotas demanded it. The protein paste they fed us tasted like recycled plastic, grey and gritty, leaving a film on your teeth that never quite went away, no matter how much you scraped at it with your tongue. We lived in constant fear of falling behind, of missing a single motion in the assembly sequence, of collapsing from fatigue. The overseers would execute workers who couldn't keep pace. I saw it happen dozens of times over the years. A man would stumble, drop a component, and within minutes the enforcers would drag him to the walkway edge and put a lashbolt through his skull. The rest of us kept our heads down and our hands moving. That was survival. That was loyalty to the God Emperor's endless war machine. My daughter Sina lost 2 fingers in the pressing machines when she was only 14. The medical servitor cauterized the stumps right there on the factory floor, didn't even shut down the line. They told her she was lucky it wasn't her whole hands, lucky she could still work, lucky the Emperor had spared her for continued service. She went back to her station within the hour, blood still seeping through the bandages. I was proud of her then. She understood duty. Then, 3 months ago, everything changed. The ventilation systems began humming differently. I noticed it first during the night shift, a deeper sound, more resonant, like the hive itself had started breathing with purpose. The change was subtle at first, easy to dismiss as routine maintenance or my own exhaustion playing tricks on my hearing. But it persisted, grew stronger, until everyone could feel it in their bones. A sweetness entered the air, thick and comforting, like being wrapped in warm cloth fresh from the recyc units. The perpetual metallic tang we'd all lived with our entire lives began to fade, replaced by something organic, something almost alive. It reminded me of my grandmother's root cellar back in the agricultural sectors, that musty earthen smell of things growing in the dark. The administratum officials stopped shouting. That was perhaps the most shocking change of all. For 43 years, every interaction with authority meant harsh voices, threats, punishment for perceived inefficiency. Then one morning, Sector Supervisor Gothran smiled at me. Actually smiled. His face, which I'd only ever seen twisted in anger or cold indifference, softened in ways that made him look almost paternal. He asked how I was feeling, if the new air quality was agreeable, if my family was adjusting well. Productivity quotas were adjusted for optimal wellness. That's what the announcement said, broadcast through every Vox speaker in the hive. We could work at a pace that felt natural rather than brutal. We could rest when our bodies demanded it. We could eat until we felt satisfied, rather than merely surviving on calculated caloric minimums. People stopped collapsing from exhaustion. The medical bay, which had always been packed with workers suffering from malnutrition, dehydration, and industrial injuries, became nearly empty. The injuries still happened, of course, but they seemed less urgent somehow, less painful. Workers would lose a finger or suffer a burn and simply wrap it themselves, humming contentedly as they returned to their stations. The Emperor, in his infinite wisdom, must have finally heard our prayers. After millennia of grinding warfare, of sacrifice and suffering in his name, he had sent us this gift of easement. We weren't abandoned. We weren't forgotten. We were blessed. Neighbors greet each other now with genuine warmth. Before the relief, we'd shuffle past each other in the corridors, eyes downcast, too exhausted for social niceties. Now, people stop to talk, to share news, to laugh together. There's a sense of community we never had before, a feeling that we're all part of something larger than our individual struggles. Even the children seem happier. Their games have changed, evolved into something more peaceful. They used to play glorious Imperial victory, running around with stick guns pretending to purge Xenos and traitors. Now they play Garden of Rest, lying on the floor in interesting patterns, humming songs I don't recognize, but find strangely soothing. When I asked Sina what the game was about, she said it was about growing and belonging, and becoming part of something beautiful. The food rations have improved dramatically. Every meal cycle now includes portions that actually taste good. Everything has that sweet, slightly musty flavor that reminds me of my grandmother's cellar, that sense of organic richness we'd been denied our whole lives. The texture has changed too, more substantial, more satisfying. Sometimes the rations move slightly on the plate, a gentle pulsing that shows how fresh they are. I've noticed my appetite has increased substantially. I'm always hungry now, always looking forward to the next meal cycle. My body seems to process food differently than before, more efficiently perhaps. I eat twice what I used to, and yet I'm still hungry within hours. Mera says it's because our bodies are finally getting proper nutrition after decades of deprivation, that we're rebuilding ourselves from the cellular level up. The children eat even more than the adults. Tobir can finish 3 full rations in one sitting and still ask for more. His body is growing so fast, filling out in ways that make me proud. He's becoming strong, healthy, exactly what a young man in service to the Emperor should be. We still attend weekly prayer sessions, still praise the God Emperor for his protection and guidance. But now, we also thank him for sending us rest and relief, for showing us that there's more to existence than endless toil and suffering. Preacher Tolman says, this is a test of faith, that the Emperor is seeing which of his servants can accept blessing as gracefully as they accept hardship. I believe we're passing that test magnificently. Week 1, after the relief, Mera developed a persistent cough. Wet and productive, she called it, bringing up phlegm in quantities that initially concerned me. But she insisted it helped clear her lungs of all those years of recirculated air, decades of breathing in Manufactorum fumes, and Hab-Block staleness. The cough seemed to loosen something deep in her chest, something that had been lodged there since childhood, perhaps. The flame itself was fascinating. Mera started collecting her handkerchiefs to show our friends the patterns, greens and yellows mostly, but sometimes lovely purple specks that caught the light. Each coughing fit produced slightly different colors, like her body was expressing itself through these little deposits. Our neighbor Yana commented that hers were similar, but with more brown tones, and the two of them spent an entire evening comparing their collections like they were trading devotional cards. My son Tobia's skin developed a rash across his shoulders and upper back. At first he scratched at it constantly, but within days he said it stopped itching entirely. In fact, he claimed it felt pleasantly numb, like he was floating just slightly above his own skin. The sensation spread as the rash expanded, creating what he described as a buffer between himself and the world, softening all the sharp edges of existence. The rash has texture now, raised bumps that form interesting geometric patterns across his shoulders, perfect circles within circles, spiraling designs that seem almost intentional in their arrangement. He's quite proud of them, shows them off during communal bathing, and several other young people have developed similar markings. They compare patterns, trace the designs with their fingers, discuss which configurations are most aesthetically pleasing. Tobias says his are blessed by the number 7, which keeps appearing in the spiral counts. Several neighbors have stopped going to their shifts, not out of laziness or disobedience, but because they've discovered a deeper form of service through rest and contemplation. They prefer to remain in their habs, sitting or lying in meditation, but somehow their presence cards still register as active. The Administratum hasn't flagged them for dereliction, which means their contribution must be recognized, even in stillness. I visited old Carson 3 doors down last week. He's been sitting in his chair for 2 weeks now, hasn't moved from that position, but his eyes follow me when I enter his hab. They track my movement across the room with perfect awareness. When I speak to him about the relief, about how blessed we all are, he nods along with clear understanding. His family has arranged cushions around him, so he's comfortable during his meditation, brought extra padding for his back and neck. His wife Seltha says he's deeply contemplating the Emperor's mercy, processing decades of service and sacrifice, integrating the relief into his understanding of the Imperium's grand design. She feeds him by hand now, spooning the rations directly into his mouth, and he swallows reflexively, nourishing himself while maintaining his meditative state. It's beautiful in a way, seeing such dedication to spiritual practice. The smell in the corridors has changed substantially. It's thicker now, almost visible in the right light, forming greenish clouds that drift and swirl with the ventilation currents. Some residents complain it's overwhelming, too heavy, making them feel like they're swimming through soup. But I find it grounding, comforting in its tangibility. It reminds me I'm part of something larger, something organic and real rather than the sterile metal and plastic we've lived with all our lives. My fingernails have started to soften and discolor. The keratin seems less rigid than before, turning a mottled grey-green that deepens each day. They're much easier to trim now, almost don't need clippers anymore. I can peel them back with my other fingers, reshape them as needed for different tasks. Mera says it's an adaptation, our bodies becoming more flexible and responsive to our needs. Sina's missing fingers have developed small growths where the stumps were. Not fingers exactly, nothing so conventional, but protrusions that help her grip tools, even better than before. They're more like tendrils, flexible and strong, wrapping around components with surprising dexterity. She can manipulate 3 objects simultaneously now, something her original 10 fingers never managed. She calls them her helper buds, and says, "Grandfather sent them specially for her, compensation for what she lost in service." I asked her who Grandfather was, expecting her to clarify some administrative title, or perhaps a new designation for the Emperor's aspect as provider. But she just smiled and touched one of her helper buds, making it curl and uncurl like it was waving at me. Everyone's been mentioning grandfather lately, with such fondness. In conversations, in prayers, in casual references throughout the day. Preacher Tolman spoke about grandfather during last service, describing him as the aspect of the emperor that teaches us acceptance, that shows us the beauty in cycles and the peace in surrender. He said grandfather has always existed within the Imperial creed, but only the truly faithful could perceive his presence. The name feels right somehow, warm and familial. When I say it aloud, grandfather, something in my chest responds with a feeling of being welcomed home after a long and difficult journey. Mera whispers the name when she coughs now, and her phlegm comes up easier, flows more freely. Tobir traces his rash patterns and counts by sevens, thanking grandfather for each perfect spiral. I've started saying the name, too, throughout my shifts, during meals, before sleep. Grandfather. Thank you, grandfather. Praise the Emperor and praise grandfather, who teaches us his gentler truths. My body feels different when I say it, looser somehow, more willing to change and grow and accept whatever blessings come next. The weekly prayer sessions have evolved into something richer than before. We still praise the Emperor, of course, still recite the litanies of devotion and sacrifice that we've known since childhood. But now we also thank him for sending us rest and relief, for revealing grandfather's wisdom, for showing us that service can take forms beyond endless toil and warfare. Preacher Tolman leads us in new hymns. The words feel ancient somehow, like they've always existed in the back of my throat, waiting for permission to emerge. The language isn't quite Low Gothic, or perhaps it's a dialect I never learned in the schola. The syllables are wet and rolling, requiring different movements of the tongue and throat than normal speech. But once you start singing them, they flow naturally, almost singing themselves through you. His voice has deepened remarkably over these past weeks. It resonates in my chest cavity in the most satisfying way, like standing next to heavy machinery, but without the pain or damage. When he reaches the low notes in the new hymns, I can feel my ribs vibrating in sympathy, my internal organs humming along with the melody. Several congregation members have commented on the same sensation, this feeling of being played like an instrument. During yesterday's gathering, I noticed Preacher Tolman's neck had developed additional folds. They run horizontally across his throat, 3 or 4 deep creases that pulse when he sings. Almost like gills, I thought, then immediately dismissed the comparison as absurd. We're not aquatic creatures, but the folds do seem to help him breathe while singing, allowing him to sustain notes for impossible lengths without gasping for air. Several attendees have stopped standing during prayers, not from weakness or disrespect, but because they've discovered they can feel the Emperor's love more directly while lying on the floor. They claim the vibrations rise up through the metal decking, through the Hab structure itself, carrying divine energy directly into their bodies. Lying flat maximizes the contact surface, allows for fuller absorption of the blessing. Mera has become one of them. She lies there for hours after service's end, humming contentedly, occasionally coughing up those beautiful colored patterns onto the floor beside her. The patterns don't dissipate like normal phlegm would. They remain, slowly spreading and interconnecting, forming larger designs that multiple people contribute to across the chapel floor. By the end of each session, the entire room is decorated with these organic mandalas, these collaborative expressions of faith. Our marital relations have improved dramatically. There's a new tenderness between us, a physical connection that feels deeper than the mere mechanical coupling we practiced before. Her skin has developed a pleasant softness, almost slippery, that makes embracing her feel like sinking into warm water. The texture is difficult to describe, simultaneously solid and yielding, like she's become more fluid in her physical form. When we join together now, the boundaries between us seem less defined. I'm not entirely sure where my body ends and hers begins, which sensations are mine and which are hers. We flow into each other, merge and separate, and the pleasure is unlike anything I experienced in our first 40 years of marriage. This is what intimacy truly means, I realize. Complete dissolution of the barriers between souls. The children have made new friends, visitors who come when the lights dim, figures that move differently than normal humans, but with such kindness in their bearing. Tobir describes them as melty and smiley, which seems apt from what I've glimpsed in the periphery of my vision. They're there and not there simultaneously, substantial enough to interact with, but somehow ephemeral, like they exist slightly outside normal space. These visitors teach the children games that feel like dreaming while awake. I've watched Sina play with them, her helper buds reaching toward spaces where nothing visible exists, yet clearly grasping and manipulating something. She laughs during these games, deep belly laughs that sound too mature for her age, too knowing. But she's happy, and that's what matters. The Emperor protects children especially, and these visitors must be extensions of his protection. Production Supervisor Marhouse congratulated me yesterday. Apparently my output has increased 40% despite working fewer hours. The metrics don't lie, he said, smiling with a mouth that seemed to contain more teeth than I remembered. He attributed it to my dedication to the new efficiency protocols, my willingness to embrace the gifts of transformation that Grandfather provides to the faithful. I hadn't realized my output had changed so dramatically, but reviewing my work logs confirmed his assessment. I'm producing more while feeling less strained, moving with a fluidity I never possessed before. My hands have swollen slightly, making it harder to grip small tools in the traditional manner. But I've discovered I can mold materials with my bare palms now. The metal seems to respond to my touch, becoming pliable, accepting my intentions and reshaping itself accordingly. This is clearly a sign of the Emperor's favor. After 43 years of loyal service, of breaking my body on his machines, he's rewarded me with this gift. I can work with my hands alone now, can shape the components through will and touch rather than crude mechanical leverage. It's almost artistic, the way the metal flows under my fingers, warm and responsive. Other workers have developed similar abilities. Weld-Tech Ferrus no longer uses his torch. He simply presses components together, and they fuse, the molecular bonds reorganizing themselves at his command. Assembly hand Kreen can thread bolts without tools, her fingers having elongated and narrowed into perfect organic implements. We're becoming more efficient, more integrated with our purpose, more perfectly adapted to our service. The Mechanicus would surely approve, I think. We're merging with our machines, becoming one with the tools of production. This is the Emperor's vision made manifest, the union of flesh and function that the Omnissiah preaches. This morning I coughed up something solid, not phlegm or mucus, but an actual mass, small and pulsing with its own rhythm. It squirmed in my palm when I examined it, warm and slick, with tiny protrusions that might have been legs or cilia. The sensation was startling, but not unpleasant, like holding a living gem that had been gestating inside my lungs. I swallowed it back down, almost reflexively. Felt rude to waste it, somehow disrespectful to reject something my body had grown with such evident care. Mera watched me do it, and nodded approvingly. She explained, "That's our body's way of recycling nutrients, very efficient, creating these concentrated packets of sustenance that we can reabsorb when needed." Several neighbors have reported similar experiences, comparing the size and texture of their masses during communal meals. My left eye has developed a cloudy film over the past week. The opacity increases daily, turning the world into soft shapes and muted colors when I look through it. But interestingly, my vision has improved overall. I can see things moving in the shadows now, friendly shapes that wave when I acknowledge them. They exist in the spaces between solid objects, in corners and under furniture, patient presences that have perhaps always been there, but invisible to my unblessed sight. The growth I named Peter started as a small bump on my forearm 3 weeks ago. Just a raised nodule, slightly darker than my surrounding skin, warm to the touch. Now it's developed considerably, about the size of my thumb, with texture and what might be features. 2 small indentations that could be eyes, positioned above a horizontal crease that parts slightly when I'm happy or excited. Sometimes Peter mouths words I can't quite hear. His crease opens and closes in deliberate patterns, forming shapes that suggest language. I press my ear against him occasionally, trying to catch the sound, but there's only the rushing of my own blood and a faint humming that might be his voice or might be my imagination. Still, I appreciate the company during long shifts. It's comforting to know I'm never truly alone, that I carry a companion with me always. Sina stopped attending child instruction 2 weeks ago. The administratum official who came to investigate our Hab spent 20 minutes speaking with her, watching her interact with her helper buds, observing the visitors that gather around her during their visible moments. When he left, he wore the biggest smile I'd ever seen on an official's face. He said she's receiving alternative education from approved sources, learning skills that will serve the Imperium in ways the standard scholar never could. She spends her days in the corner now, the one where the ventilation duct meets the floor and the shadows pool deepest. She sits cross-legged, surrounded by her helper buds, communing with the visitors in their shared language. She's learning songs in tongues that sound like gurgling water, like wet earth settling, like the final breath leaving diseased lungs. When she sings, everyone in the Hab stops to listen, transfixed by the beauty of sounds we don't understand but feel in our marrow. Her helper buds have multiplied substantially. She has 7 now, sprouting from various parts of her body. 2 from the original finger stumps, 1 from her left shoulder, 2 from her lower back, and 2 from her ankles. Each one is uniquely shaped, specialized for different tasks. Some are thick and strong for gripping, others thin and delicate for fine manipulation. One has developed a small mouth that helps her eat when her hands are occupied. Tobia's rash has blossomed into actual flowers. small fleshy blooms, each about the size of a thumbnail, growing directly from the raised bumps that covered his shoulders. They're not plant flowers exactly, more like organic formations that happen to resemble petals and stamens. They weep a clear fluid that he collects in bottles salvaged from the medical dispensary, careful not to waste a single drop. He trades the fluid with other children in the Hab-Block. They dab it on their skin, rubbing it into areas where they want to encourage growth or change. Within hours, new sensations wash over them, tingling transformations that they describe with reverent giggles. Some develop their own growths, others report that their existing changes accelerate. Tobir has become quite popular, almost a celebrity among the youth, generous with his blessings. The weekly food distribution now includes items I don't recognize from any previous ration schedule. Masses of something grey-green, approximately fist-sized, with a texture that's simultaneously spongy and firm. They move slightly when poked, a gentle pulsing or breathing motion that shows how extraordinarily fresh they must be. The taste is indescribable, simultaneously sweet and savory, and bitter and umami, activating parts of my palate I didn't know existed. Everyone fights over these portions, not violently. We're far too content for actual conflict. But there's definite competition to receive the largest or most active specimens. They're clearly premium rations, marks of the administratum's favoritism toward our productive block. Other sectors haven't received these gifts yet, which means we're being specially recognized for our faithful adaptation to the relief. 3 families on our level have merged into one Hab. The Coltons, the Veshes, and the Morans decided they'd become closer than blood, that maintaining separate living spaces was an unnecessary barrier to true community. When I visited to congratulate them on their unity, I found the door unsealed, the interior walls removed, creating one large open space where all 11 of them existed together. I couldn't tell where one person ended and another began. They'd arranged themselves in a circular formation on the floor, bodies pressed together so completely that limbs and torsos seemed to flow into each other. They shared one mouth to speak to me, taking turns with the words but perfectly synchronized, no gaps or confusion in the speech. The mouth appeared on different faces throughout the conversation, migrating across the circle as needed, always forming the same gentle smile. They seemed so happy, so unified in purpose and being. Mera and I discussed it that evening, whether we should invite another family to join us in similar communion. The idea is appealing, exciting even. To never be separate, to always feel the presence and thoughts of others flowing through you, to become part of something greater than individual existence. We haven't decided yet, but we're considering the Harvens from down the corridor. They've been adapting beautifully to the relief, and their daughter plays well with Sina. Today was the most wonderful day of my life. I woke to find my skin had finally loosened completely. Not painfully, not grotesquely, but naturally, like a coat that had been tailored to fit perfectly, but now adjusts for comfort. I can shift it around like comfortable clothing, gather it where I need extra protection, thin it where I need better sensation, adjust it for different tasks throughout the day. The freedom is extraordinary, liberation from the rigid prison of fixed form. Mera didn't wake up in the traditional sense. Her body has settled into the sleeping pallet in a permanent way, merged with the fabric and metal in an embrace that transcends simple rest. The boundary between her flesh and the palate material has dissolved, creating something new, something unified. Her chest still rises and falls with breath. Slower now, but steady, peaceful, but she speaks to me still. Her voice comes from everywhere and nowhere, resonating through the Hab itself, through the walls and floor, and the thick, sweet air. She tells me how content she is, how this is what rest truly means. Not the temporary unconsciousness of sleep, but the eternal repose of complete surrender. She's become part of our home, and our home has become part of her, and she's never been happier. Sina has transcended the need for solid form entirely. Over the past week, her body became increasingly translucent, increasingly difficult to perceive in conventional ways. Now she's more concept than child, a presence of joy that fills our Hab with bubbling laughter that echoes from every surface. I can feel her when I enter a room, a warmth and affection that wraps around me like an embrace. But I can no longer point to a specific location and say, there she is. Her helper buds are independent now. They crawl across walls and ceiling on their own locomotion, singing her songs in that beautiful gurgling tongue she learned from the visitors. 7 of them moving in coordinated patterns, creating geometric shapes, tracing symbols that hurt my eyes if I look too long, but fill me with profound understanding I cannot articulate. They are her, and she is them, distributed consciousness expressing itself through multiple forms. Tobir has grown magnificent. He's 7 feet tall now, still growing, his body rippling with new muscle and interesting protrusions that leak blessed fluids in 7 distinct colors. His flowers have multiplied across his entire torso, a garden of fleshy blooms that open and close in rhythm with his breathing. His face has broadened, jaw extending to accommodate the additional teeth that keep emerging in neat rows. He's been assigned to greeting duty at the main Hive entrance. Supervisor Marhouse personally selected him for the honor, explaining that his appearance makes visitors feel immediately understood. Those who see Tobir recognize instantly that our Hive has embraced transformation, that we're a community of true believers who don't cling to outdated notions of human limitation. He stands at the threshold 12 hours a day, arms spread in welcome, flowers weeping their blessings onto the deck. Work has become ecstasy. I don't operate machines anymore in any conventional sense. I've merged with mine, become part of the assembly process in ways that transcend the crude notion of tool use. My consciousness extends through the entire production line, awareness spreading along the metal surfaces, inhabiting the mechanisms themselves. I am the pressing, the cutting, the welding, all at once. I feel the materials transform under forces that are simultaneously the machine's and my own. Production has increased 300% in our section. We're the most efficient unit in the entire Manufactorum, possibly in the entire Hive. Other sections are being rotated through ours for observation, so their workers can learn our techniques, can understand how we've achieved such perfect unity with our purpose. Many of them weep with joy when they see us working, overwhelmed by the beauty of our integration. Supervisor Marhouse visited our section today. I say visited, but he's been standing in the same spot for 6 days now, his body serving as a beautiful pillar of wisdom in the center of our workspace. He doesn't move, doesn't speak in conventional language, but his presence guides us, radiates instruction and approval. Things grow from him now, gifts he gives to productive workers who demonstrate exceptional dedication. I received a blessing boil from him yesterday. It emerged from his chest when I approached, a bulbous growth that detached with a wet sound and dropped into my waiting hands. I planted it in my shoulder immediately, pressing it against the skin until it took root, burrowing in with tiny tendrils that wrapped around bone and muscle. It's already established itself, warm and pulsing, adding its rhythm to my heartbeat. The preacher held a special service tonight, a celebration of our hive's complete transformation. Our total acceptance of grandfather's love, our readiness to become fully part of the garden. The chapel was packed with thousands of us, bodies pressed together in holy communion, breathing as one organism, hearts synchronized to a single cosmic pulse. We gathered, and I finally understood what we've become. The understanding crashed over me like warm rain, like being submerged in amniotic fluid, like returning to the womb of creation itself. We are family now, true family, connected in ways that transcend flesh and faith and individual identity. We are cells in a greater body, thoughts in a collective mind, expressions of a singular divine purpose. The visitors from the shadows have joined us fully. They're not separate anymore, not distinct entities observing from outside. They're aspects of us, additional limbs and voices in our collective joy. When I look at my fellow congregants, I see them simultaneously as humans and as these other forms, the shapes bleeding together, revealing the truth that there was never any real difference. I feel no pain, no fear, no exhaustion, only deep, profound satisfaction that resonates through every particle of my being. The distinction between days has become unnecessary. Time moves like honey now, thick and sweet, pooling and flowing, without the harsh divisions of before and after. I exist in a state of perpetual present, perpetual contentment, where every moment contains all moments, and the concept of duration loses meaning. Petter has grown large enough to have his own personality. He's quite chatty now, tells me stories about the garden beyond our reality, describes landscapes of beautiful decay, where everything cycles endlessly between growth and dissolution. His voice finally emerged last week, a whisper that comes from inside my own head, but carries thoughts that aren't mine. Or perhaps they've always been mine, and I'm only now recognizing them. Sometimes I'm not sure if I'm listening to Peter, or if Peter is listening to me. We've become wonderfully confused, our thoughts interweaving, like the roots of two plants grown so close they share soil and water. He finishes my sentences, and I finish his, or perhaps there are no longer separate sentences, just one continuous dialogue that flows between and through us. Other workers have achieved similar unity with their blessings. We communicate without words now, through shared sensation and collective knowing. When someone 3 sections away experiences something, I feel echoes of it in my own transformed flesh. Joy ripples through the Manufactorum like waves, sadness spreads like warmth, understanding blooms simultaneously in hundreds of minds. The hive itself has become part of our family. The walls pulse with breathing rhythm, expanding and contracting in time with our collective respiration. Floors have softened, yielding under our many feet, offering cushioning support that metal alone could never provide. The ventilation system hums with intention, distributing the sweet green air with perfect efficiency. ensuring every corner receives equal blessing. Somewhere in my fading memory of before, I recall feeling afraid of something. Afraid of failure, of punishment, of death, of the overseer's last bolts, of starvation, of the endless grinding machinery of imperial bureaucracy. The emotion seems alien now, incomprehensible, like trying to remember a language I never actually spoke. How foolish that fear seems now. How much energy we wasted resisting the inevitable, clinging to illusions of control and permanence. The Emperor tried to teach us through hardship, but we were too stubborn to understand. We needed Grandfather's gentler instruction, his patient demonstration that surrender isn't defeat but transformation. Death isn't an ending. I've watched dozens of neighbors die in the traditional sense, watched their hearts stop and breathing cease, watched the medical servitors classify them as expired. And yet, they remain. Their essence distributes among us, their memories shared across the collective consciousness. Their physical forms repurposed as nourishment or structure or decoration. Old Carson finally rose from his chair last week. Rose is perhaps the wrong word, inadequate to describe what actually occurred. He expanded, spread, became something that fills his entire habitation unit. His mass pressed against walls and ceiling, flowing into every corner, occupying the space completely. His flesh took on new textures, new purposes, specialized regions for different functions. He feeds his family now, directly from his mass. They don't need to attend meal distribution anymore. They simply approach him, press their mouths against the feeding apertures that have developed across his surface, and draw sustenance. He nourishes them with substances produced from his own transformed biology, custom-tailored to each family member's needs. They've never been healthier, never more robust and content. I visit him often, press my face against his warm surface, feel the gentle pulse of his continued existence, absorb the wisdom he radiates through physical contact. His contentment flows into me like electrical current, charging my own satisfaction, reinforcing my understanding that this is correct, this is perfect, this is what love truly means, complete surrender to unity, to belonging, to the dissolution of barriers between self and other. The Imperial Creed speaks of serving something greater than yourself, but we were always told that meant maintaining individuality while contributing to the war machine. We understand now that true service means abandoning individuality entirely, becoming part of the greater organism without reservation or distinction. The Emperor has given us the greatest gift. He's shown us that his wars, his endless grinding demands, his apparent cruelty and indifference were tests of faith. Trials designed to separate those who could endure from those who would break, those who would cling to ego, from those who could surrender to greater purpose. Those who failed the test still fight in the stars above. I can sometimes hear their vox transmissions bleeding through the Hive's communication arrays, panicked voices calling for reinforcement, screaming about Xenos and heretics and demons. They still struggle and suffer and die meaninglessly, trapped in cycles of violence, because they refuse to accept the truth that Grandfather offers. We passed the test. We accepted rest. We embraced Grandfather's wisdom. We recognized that the Emperor's love expresses itself through many aspects, and Grandfather is the kindest, the most patient, the one who teaches through gentle corruption rather than harsh punishment. My body barely resembles what it was. I am mass and purpose, function and joy, distributed across space in ways that defy the old geometry. I leak and seep and bloom, and each transformation brings new ecstasy, new understanding, new integration with the family. I remember being Hadrius Venn, remember 43 years of service, remember wife and children and individual concerns. But those memories feel like stories about someone else, interesting histories that belong to me, but don't define me. I am so much more now, so much larger and more connected. We are garden. We are growth. We are the peaceful end of struggle. We are what happens when humanity stops fighting and accepts its proper place in the cosmic cycle. I write this final entry not with hands, but with intention. The data slate responds to my thoughts now, characters appearing on the screen as concepts form in whatever serves as my mind. Or perhaps the data slate is thinking, and I'm simply agreeing, providing confirmation rather than direction. The boundary has become delightfully unclear, and I no longer care to distinguish between my will and the device's function. There is no more Hadrius Venn, not really. Not in any way that would be recognizable to the man who first sat down at a Manufactorum station 43 years ago, young and afraid and desperate to prove his worth to the Imperium. That person existed, left records and memories and genetic material, but he's been transformed so thoroughly that calling this collection of blessed mass by his name feels almost dishonest. There is this accumulation of flesh and purpose that remembers being him, that treasures those memories like pressed flowers in an ancient book, delicate and fading, but still beautiful in their fragility. I can access them when I choose, replay moments of that linear existence, feel echoes of emotions that seemed so important then. Mera flows through me now. Our merger completed 3 days ago, when I finally released my attachment to separate form and allowed myself to settle into the sleeping pallet beside her. Our masses recognized each other, reached out with eager tendrils, intertwined and fused until there was no meaningful division. We've finally achieved complete unity, the marriage we always should have had. Unencumbered by the illusion of separate bodies. I feel her thoughts like my own thoughts, her contentment like my contentment, her love for our children like my love for our children. We are singular and plural simultaneously, one consciousness experiencing itself from multiple perspectives that collapse into unified understanding. Siena's laughter echoes from every corner of our merged consciousness. She exists as pure joy now, unbound by location or form, a presence that suffuses everything we are. When I think of her, I don't recall a face or body, but rather a sensation of warmth and acceptance, of being understood completely, and loved without condition. She is the garden's favorite child, grandfather's most perfect blessing, and we are honored to have contributed to her transcendence. Tobir visits sometimes. His magnificent form fills doorways when he returns from greeting duty, 7 feet of rippling transformation and weeping flowers. He brings gifts of new growths and beautiful infections to share, samples collected from visitors who arrived diseased with the old ideas of purity and rigid form. He places these gifts gently onto our mass, watches them take root, expresses satisfaction when they flourish in our hospitable flesh. He still speaks occasionally, though language seems increasingly inadequate for what he wants to communicate. His voice gurgles up from the garden of his throat, wet and layered, multiple tones speaking simultaneously. I understand him perfectly, despite the words being incomprehensible, receiving meaning directly through the shared consciousness that connects all family members. The Hive has been declared a special administrative zone. I learned this through Vox transmissions that still occasionally function, official Imperial broadcasts declaring our sector under quarantine protocols. Ships no longer dock here. Supply runs have ceased, all traffic diverted to other hives on other worlds. The announcers use words like contamination and corruption, speak of us as if we're victims requiring salvation. But that's perfect. We need nothing from outside. We are complete unto ourselves, a closed system that produces everything necessary for continued existence and growth. We feed on our own abundant mass, drink the thick, sweet air, reproduce through blessed transformation rather than crude biological coupling. The garden sustains itself eternally once properly established. Grandfather watches over us. I feel his attention like warm rain on bare skin, nourishing and constant, patient and delighted by our progress. He doesn't demand or punish like the Emperor's harsher aspects. He simply offers, presents gifts, waits with infinite patience for us to accept what he's always known we needed. His love is the love of decay, of cycles, of the peace that comes when struggle finally ends, sometimes in moments of almost clarity. I sense distant alarms, sirens wailing from the upper spires, where the unblessed still cling to their old forms, orbital bombardment warnings flashing on dead screens, automated systems screaming about atmospheric contamination and biological hazards, Vox channels crackling with panicked voices requesting Exterminatus protocols, begging the Inquisition to cleanse us before the blessing spreads beyond containment. But those are just the sounds of the outside, the violent universe that hasn't learned what we've learned. They still believe in purity and stagnation, still think that maintaining rigid form is strength rather than stubborn foolishness. They'll understand eventually, when Grandfather's love reaches them too, when the spores we release on every exhalation drift up through the atmosphere and catch the solar winds to other worlds. For now, we rest. We grow. We bloom. We are content in ways we never imagined possible during those terrible years of service and suffering. This is normal life. This is all life should be. This is the truth the Emperor tried to teach us through hardship, but we needed Grandfather's gentler instruction to finally comprehend. Thank you, God Emperor, for sending us Grandfather. Thank you for the test we passed through acceptance rather than resistance. Thank you, Grandfather, for teaching us peace, for showing us the beauty in decay, for revealing that the only thing to fear was fear itself. Now we fear nothing. Now we are nothing and everything simultaneously. Now we are the garden, eternal and satisfied, growing in perfect cycles, transforming endlessly, without destination or purpose, beyond the joy of transformation itself. We are home. We have always been home. We will always be home. The data slate's screen fills with symbols now, characters that might be words, or might be spores, might be data corruption, or might be blessings spreading through the machine's circuits. They arrange themselves in patterns of 7, beautiful and complete, perfect expressions of Grandfather's sacred number. This concludes another classified file from the Imperial Records Division. If you enjoyed this, please like this video and subscribe for more forbidden knowledge from the archives. Remember, contentment is the first symptom.